Hi, my name is Dr. Jamie Klingman. I am a business broker based out of Tampa, Florida, but licensed in several states. I think what makes me a different kind of broker is I became a broker because I sold my own company and realized how few brokers really understood the under $10 million business space.
My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a business broker with the Exit Strategy Company. And I got into this business because I sold my business as well about 5 years ago. And now I get the privilege to help others exit from their businesses as well.
Sam Martinez.
Jamie Klingman, how you doing?
All right, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. So our producer has told us that we need to start talking about deal structures and the differences in that. And so she mentioned, hey, what's a stock sale as opposed to an asset sale? I think that's a fantastic place to start. So let's start there. When somebody is selling a business, I should say when somebody's buying a business, how typically do they buy it?
I think it depends, as always. I feel like my answer is always it depends, but it depends somewhat on industry and it depends on the specifics of the business because there's advantages to a stock sale and there's advantages to an asset sale. I would say generally most buyers, if possible, prefer an asset sale. And that's because there's a more clean break between the liability of the previous entity, any debts that might be out there, those types of things, versus a stock sale where literally the EIN number is changing over. But there's a lot of instances that one must do a stock sale because it would just be too hard with all of the things that would have to be changed.
So in an asset sale, just to be clear, and I know that's the way my business was transacted was on as an asset sale. They bought all my customer list. They bought all the assets of the business, but they did not buy my corporate name. Part of the deal was that I couldn't reuse that corporate name, but I eventually had to shut that company down. So on an asset sale, it really is that it's just buying all the assets. So there are so many reasons why people buy or people transact using stock instead of asset, because I think it's pretty clear asset is definitely a much better way to go for the buyer. Um, what are some of those industries that typically use a stock sale, in our enterprise values under 10 million? Because, once we get bigger, there's all kinds of different variations. But um, what would you say are a couple of the industries that use stock instead of asset?
Absolutely. And just point of clarification, you can actually sell your company's name, but the entity can't be sold. So it's the EIN and the corporate name as used in the entity formation can't be transferred, but you can
Gotcha.
a new entity and then use a DBA until the previous one's dissolved, those types of things. But yes, the types of industries that stock sales tend to be a better deal for, particularly in the under 10 million space, are where there's contracts. So if they're contracts with vendors, contracts with insurance boards, if it's medical, those contracts with anyone where it would be harmful to have to go back to all of the people who signed those contracts and say, hey, sign a contract with this new entity. That's where a stock sale is really useful because it prevents the need to do that.
Yeah, and most contracts are not assignable. Like a lot of them say you can't, or you have to get permission to assign those contracts. So I know I mentioned I've worked in the government contracting space. Usually, it's better to do a stock sale for reasons of just making it easier, but you still have to get permission anyways. So, from primes or that kind of thing. So, but medical, I find that one very, very interesting. So we had a situation a few years ago where a medical doctor got the advice from another broker and they looked at the EBITDA, they looked at, the basic financials and said, you have nothing to sell here, because it was just basically paying the doctor group, it was a couple of doctors, their salaries and such, and there was nothing to sell. They went ahead and just started telling all of their clients that they're just closing it down and then had a conversation with us. And unfortunately, it was kind of too late. But they had a ton of value. They had all kinds of insurance contracts that they could have sold the entity. They could have done a stock sale, and that were very, very valuable because those are very difficult to get those insurance contracts. So just an example.
Absolutely. That's the, the big difference again between an asset deal and stock deal is that whole scooping out versus transferring over. And sometimes you can walk that line, which is what, in your example, trying to do that. And unfortunately, it just didn't quite work out. But that is something to consider when you're building your business to be sold, though, is thinking through all of the pieces that would go into deciding whether to do a stock or an asset deal. Obviously, talking to your financial planner, talking to your CPA is always, always super important. Also, thinking through there are things that are true no matter what. So, for example, if you have an EIDL loan. Those are very popular or were very popular a couple of years ago. So we see a lot of companies with those. An asset sale most likely triggers that note to be due as well. And that liability can transfer to the new person who bought the assets. So it's important to have resolutions in place around that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because there's still a lot of those loans out there. The other thing is taxation, guys. Yeah, so do make sure that before you decide on what structure, whether it's asset or whether it's stock, there's different tax consequences, especially from a seller's point of view, on what's going to be capital gains as opposed to income tax. And of course, we want to get as much to capital gains as possible. It's a much lower tax bracket. So yeah, there's a lot to it. And that's just talking about stock versus asset. We haven't even talked about deal structure yet, but we will.
Absolutely. I'll see you again soon.